All right. Hey, everybody. Chuck Holton here. Thank you for watching The Hot Zone. I am still coming to you from my son's basement in Savannah, Georgia. And that wasn't the plan. Actually, that wasn't what I was planning on doing today. I was planning on coming to you from my home in Panama. But because of the vagaries of air travel and the great and exciting adventure that it is, our flight got delayed to the point that we missed our connection, and so we had to reload and plan to leave again tomorrow. So that's just the way it goes sometimes. And I've had worse. I mean, we get to come back and spend another day with our granddaughter and our kids, and that's not terribly bad. So I'm not upset. But I'm still here in Savannah, Georgia, and so I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I'm seeing online. It seems like the longer this war goes on... Oh, you missed commercials? Sorry about that. I want to talk about what's happening in Israel and whether or not Israel is actually winning this conflict. Because as time goes on, I've seen more and more people on social media, on Twitter and on YouTube, talking about how Israel is losing this war because they haven't completed their objectives yet. They haven't completely finished doing what they said they wanted to do out of this war. Now, first of all, I have to point out that we need to remember that Israel didn't start this war. They didn't plan this war. They weren't hoping to go to war. They were attacked. And so they had to go from a standing start to try to accomplish their goals. And they sort of decided that Hamas had given them the opportunity to accomplish goals that they had set for themselves a long time ago. So it's not just they have to make it safe for their people in the South or in the North. Those are part of their goals, but there's more to it than that. And so I want to go through some of the objectives that Israel not only has now, but they have actually had for some time. And we'll talk about how well they're doing at reaching these goals. And I think what you'll see is that, it is certainly, you could make a case that Israel is not achieving its goals and is therefore losing. But I want to drill a little deeper into it than that, because this is what you're hearing on social media. There are pundits out there, virtually all of whom have not been to Israel and have not seen the war firsthand, like I have, who are saying that, because the IDF has not finished everything and wiped out Hamas and gotten out of Gaza and made it safe in the north and everything after a year, that represents a loss on the part of Israel. So let's talk about that. Where are they getting these arguments that they're making? We're talking about people like Ritter and McGregor, are two of my favorite anti-Israel jackwagons. But those guys have made such fools of themselves that it's almost too easy to counter their arguments, because they just say stuff, no backing in reality whatsoever. Of course, have not been to the war zone, probably would be far too cowardly to ever go into a war zone. But these guys are saying what their listeners want to hear, but it doesn't have any basis in reality necessarily. But I want to draw on, there are others out there who are starting to question whether or not Israel will be able to pull anything out of this conflict that looks like a win. So let's talk about what their stated objectives are. First of all, neutralizing or reducing the military capabilities of their enemies, specifically the Iranian proxies that have been attacking them since October 7th. And if you want one measurement on how that's going, the naysayers look at the fact that Israel still has troops in Gaza and say, look, there's a loss. They have not accomplished that objective. But you can look at what they have done in Gaza and are doing in Gaza, and I think the reality is quite a bit rosier for Israel. First of all, they've managed to kill probably 20,000 terrorists, 20,000 people who would gladly have participated in the next October 7th. That's not a loss on the part of Israel. Secondly, the number of rockets coming out of Gaza right now is lower than it was in the months leading up to October 7th. Because the Palestinians in Gaza have been firing rockets at Israel for decades. And so it was just sort of an accepted thing. If you lived in Sderot or one of the kibbutzim along the Gaza Strip, that you had to have a bomb shelter in your home. And once in a while, a couple times a week probably, you'd have to step into that bomb shelter for a while until the rockets stopped falling. Well, now the number of rockets coming out of Gaza has dropped to a trickle, much less than it was before October 7th. And the Israelis, for their part, have taken out tens of thousands of rockets that they have found and destroyed that were never fired at Israel, that would have been at some point had they not invaded. So that looks like a win to me. The next thing we could look at is just how much money Israel's adversaries have lost in this conflict. Now, it has been costly for Israel, no doubt about that. Israel had a much larger economy than some of these other nations, like Jordan or Syria for sure, right? I mean, not you, Siri, Syria. Yeah, Siri thought I was talking to her. Israel's economy is much larger, and so it has lost. Now, these are rough numbers. It's not easy to find hard numbers about what the economic losses have been to any of these countries. But I did the best I could. I did a bunch of research and tried to add up, military losses and infrastructure losses and damages and economic losses with tourism and other economic drivers, and try to come up with just round figures for you. So you can dispute these numbers, and I wouldn't argue with you because I just did the best I could here. But if we look at what these likely have cost Israel and its adversaries, the best I can come up with is that Israel has lost something in the first year, something like $50 billion. And again, this is the costs borne by their military, the economic cost of drawing up their military forces, which means drawing down their workforce, so closing down a large portion of their economy, the ports that can no longer function because of the threats from the Houthis and others, so they've gone bankrupt, and the loss of tourism. For many tourists kind of avoid going to Israel in a time like this. So that's about $50 billion. Now, if we, let me see here. So if we look at Israel's average annual GDP, it's $120 billion. That's the average from 1960 to 2022. But if you look at more recently, last year, Israel's nominal GDP was $500 billion. So half a trillion with, its GDP per capita, $54,000, which is about 5 times the global average. That's very high. So for them to lose $50 billion hurts, but it's kind of like this. If you made $250,000 a year, about 5 times the American average income. So you make $250,000 a year, and you don't have health insurance, and you get a heart problem or something like that. You have to have surgery, and it costs you, let's say, like $25,000. Well, that's going to hurt. You're not going to like paying it, but it's not going to sink you either, because $250,000, that's a couple months' pay for you. Okay? It's not a huge deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but I mean, it's not going to sink you. However, if you look at countries like, let's say Syria's average annual GDP was about,
I found this on the web for his average annual GDP.
This is, see, when I say Syria, my phone thinks I'm talking to her. So I need to put that away. In 2021, Syria's GDP was $8 billion, and their GDP per capita was only about $1,000 instead of $50,000. So if Syria has lost, I don't know, probably $1 billion total. They didn't have a lot of tourism to begin with, but they did have some economic stuff. And they've had a lot of damage done to parts of Damascus and to their airports and other industrial sites and things like that. So it's cost them, it hurts them a lot more. Let's put it that way. It hurts them in terms of the cost. It's about 15% or a little more in terms of losses. Now, if we look at Iran, let's see, we go to Iran, and Iran's 2024 GDP is expected to be about $5,000 per capita, as opposed to $50,000 per capita in Israel. So you see how their average GDP annually is, for a much larger country than Israel, is far, far lower. And the cost so far, that as far as I can tell, on Iran for the attacks that they've perpetrated against Israel and the loss of economic drivers and sanctions and all those things, the toll that they've taken on Iran, somewhere around $16.5 billion. So orders of magnitude more than what it's cost Israel in real terms. Gaza, of course, has been all but wiped out completely. Their economics are almost to zero. So the point is, Israel has been fighting against this coalition of countries led by Iran and all of its proxies. They didn't start the war. The Iranians, through their proxies, started the war. But the Iranians and their proxies have been hurt far, far more than the Israelis have in real terms. Okay? So, and that's before you even get to the subject of how much aid Israel has received from around the world. The United States alone has given more than $17 billion to Israel during this war, mostly in the form of military hardware, ammunition, and things like that to keep them going, rockets for their Iron Dome system, things like that. And so, if Israel has lost 10% of its GDP over the first year of the war, well, almost half of that has been given back to them by just the United States alone. And then you add in what they've gotten from other countries, it's not near as economically painful for Israel as it is for other countries. And then you have poor Jordan over there just trying to stay out of it. Jordan has been actually assisting Israel in some cases, like when Iran was firing rockets at them. They don't want to get sideways with Israel because Israel provides most of their water, a large portion of their electricity, a bunch of their food, all comes from Israel. They're very reliant on Israel. And they don't want to upset that apple cart. And so they're not, they're saying some things over here on this side to try to show support for the Palestinians because 60% of the people in Jordan are Palestinian. But then their actions are actually in support of Israel. But yet they have been harmed, at least from a per capita standpoint, more than almost any other country in the region because of this war. And we've seen that firsthand as we were just there last week with our tour group, the Safety Third Tours tour group. When you look at the cost on Jordan, you're talking about probably $1.5 billion. Jordan's a very small country. And so it's been extremely costly for them. Crazy that the Palestinians in Gaza attacked Israel and ended up hurting their brothers, their Palestinian brethren in Jordan more than they hurt the Israelis from an economic standpoint. So I don't think you could call that a loss on the part of Israel unless you just were making the case that nobody wins in war. And this is true. I mean, war is spectacularly wasteful. That's kind of the point of war. And nobody really wins a war. But again, it wasn't Israel's choice. They didn't start this thing. So while I'm on the note of the Americans giving aid to Israel, I wanted to show you this because this is kind of interesting to me. This is the amount of aid that the United States has given to Israel since going back to the 1970s. And you can see that we're at $12.5 billion. This is adjusted to 2024 dollars, so it's all the dollars are equal here and not including inflation. I mean, to include inflation, sorry. But you look here, and there were actually 2 times in history, back in the 1970s and 80s, when American aid for Israel was higher than it is now. But it is at a very high point for 2024. Interesting, isn't it? Now, if you go here, it shows that Israel has been the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. aid throughout its history. Now, this is not even including 2024, but this goes all the way back to 1946. So from 1946 to 2024-ish, Israel has received more than twice as much money as any other country in the world has. So all you people that complain about Ukraine but say we should support Israel, take a look at these numbers. We've actually given Ukraine far less than half of what we've given Israel, Egypt, Afghanistan, Vietnam. Wow. I mean, Ukraine's down there with what we've given Iraq. So this is just to point out that Israel has been a huge recipient of aid, and that reduces the costs of the war to Israel. Okay, so their objectives, neutralizing or reducing the military capabilities of Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. They are doing that. They have not finished that job, but they have done a good job so far doing that. And what we're seeing in Gaza now, this is not being reported on because the IDF is not allowing a lot of journalists into Gaza. But what they're doing is they're basically just creating a 1 or 2 kilometer buffer zone all around the borders of Gaza, where there is going to just be a no man's land. They've bulldozed it. It's flattened. There's no homes there. There's no buildings there. And when this is over, that thing is going to be a no man's land. And if they see people in that area, they're going to take those people out. They are creating a no man's land all the way around Gaza. So these sorts of things take time. But one thing that they have succeeded at in Gaza is closing off the flow of contraband coming through the underground tunnels from Egypt. And that has cost Egypt a lot of money, but it is definitely putting the screws to what's left of Hamas. And that's a win. That's a good thing. Okay. So their other goals have been to dismantle Iran's influence in the region. Well, if you go back and look at the video that I put up just the other day, let's see if I can get the link to that while we're talking, where I interviewed this Israeli guy. Let's see here. Let's go down here. Lior Gantz was his name. And I'm going to put the link in the chat box here so you can go see that if you like. If you haven't watched that video, you should go watch it because Lior he's an entrepreneur in Israel, and he has some very interesting commentary about Israel's goals here and about how they are accomplishing those goals. So if Israel is looking to dismantle Iran's influence, they are succeeding at that, like to a great extent, because they have so dismantled Hezbollah and Hamas over the past months that Iran is starting to pull back funding from those guys, according to Lior. And as they're pulling back this funding, their influence in the region is being reduced. And that's a good thing. They're also being seen as a pariah, even by Muslim countries, and that's not a bad thing. Thank you, Tom. You're going to Gorgona. How about that? Well, maybe we'll run into each other, Tom. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So somebody's asking me about, that is Chuck Thale. Was that who it is? What about the proposed ship canal in southern Israel? Chuck, that was something that was brought up years ago. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. And I know people who believe that they're putting this, they're planning to put a canal from Eilat all the way through the Gaza Strip into the Mediterranean Sea. The thing is, if they really wanted to do that, it doesn't make sense to put it right through Gaza because it would literally be like half a kilometer more if you measure the lines to put it right to the port at Ashkelon or Ashdod. And it makes more sense to put a canal right up to a port than to put it right through Gaza. There's no reason whatsoever that Israel would want to put anything through Gaza. They just want the Gazans to leave them alone. Now, there are a lot of Israelis who believe hey, Gaza is part of Israel. We should be able to live there if we want to. And we did live there, and we gave it up in 2005, and we should be able to go back. There are a lot of Israelis who believe that. But the idea that Israel is planning to spend, $15 billion to put a canal from Eilat to the Mediterranean Sea, and it has to go right through Gaza when it could easily just go to Ashdod, is quite illogical. It just doesn't make sense. And I would say it rises very close to the level of just being a conspiracy theory. So hopefully that answers your question. Now, the $500 million the IDF found under the hospital will be confiscated by the IDF. That's right. It was more than $500 million, I believe. I saw 1.5 billion under there, but let's say it was only 500 million. My understanding was that they didn't go down there and get it because it's in an area of Lebanon that the IDF does not control. They don't have troops in there. In the Dahia neighborhood of southern Beirut, that is not controlled by the IDF. So what they're doing is they are bombing all of that. They say that when they took out, I'm spacing out, Hassan Nasrallah in that same neighborhood, that there were hundreds of millions of dollars in the bunker with him in both cash and gold. And they just bombed it to kingdom come. So I don't know if there's like charred greenbacks floating around in the air out there when the bombs, once the fallout comes down, or if there's guys now tunneling down deep into those craters that were created by 80 something tons of bombs dropped on Hassan Nasrallah to try to find some of that gold. But good luck with that. What they have said is that the main headquarters of Hezbollah was situated underneath a hospital in the Dahia neighborhood. And so they told the people in that hospital to evacuate. I did not hear that they have bombed it just yet, but they certainly may. And if they do that, then they're just going to vaporize $1 billion, which seems kind of sad. And I'm with you. I've been thinking about that and thinking, gosh, what a waste. I mean, who couldn't use an extra $1.5 billion or whatever? And so why not do an airborne operation into Dahia neighborhood with several thousand IDF troops and go down and clear those underground bunkers, get the intelligence that they would find underneath there, and get all the cash and gold out of there, and then fly it out and take it. Why not do that? I don't know. So Aleph Tav says, was the cash US dollars? I'm sure a lot of it was. And the point I made in yesterday's live is that I would venture to say at least a third of that money came from the US taxpayer in some way, shape, or form. Because the United States gives over $300 million a year to the Lebanese army. A lot of that money makes its way to Hezbollah, no question. We also fund UNIFIL to the tune of about $450 million a year. And we know that UNIFIL is turning out to be a lot like UNRWA in that they're almost a wholly owned subsidiary of Hezbollah. And so obviously some of that money is probably getting to Hezbollah. They're getting billions of dollars a year from Qatar and Iran and in other countries like that. So those dollars or gold bars or whatever the form that they're in, some of them were under there. The bigger issue here is that Israel has succeeded in taking that money off the table and making it unavailable to Hezbollah so that they can't pay their people, so that they can't purchase more equipment, so that they can't continue operations. And So for all of the naysayers out there that are saying that Israel is losing, well, if Israel just vaporized $1.5 billion worth of hard currency that belonged to their enemies, I fail to see how that is much of a loss for Israel. They've also taken out hundreds of tons of, not pounds, hundreds of tons of explosives and weapons and missiles and rockets and things that could have been a threat to Israel. And so taking those threats out is a win for Israel. Now, it's not a complete victory by any stretch. They've got a long way to go. Wars always take longer than you think they will. I mean, who among us thought that the war on terror was going to last 2 decades and then the suits in Washington were going to end up snatching defeat from the jaws of victory and handing the Taliban back the country in Afghanistan after we had just spent 20 years and 6,000 lives taking it away from them? I mean, this is why I keep saying that Israel should not listen to the United States at all. If General Kurilla shows up over there, or Lloyd Austin, God forbid, that guy's a diversity hire if ever I saw one. Probably the most incompetent U.S. field grade officer that the U.S. military has seen since the Vietnam War. And that's being generous. If Israel is taking advice on how to win this war from those jokers, well, it's no wonder that they haven't completely, ended up with total victory yet. What I'm saying is, this isn't Israel's fault to a large extent. I mean, the only fault that Israel has is that they listened to the United States. Okay, so I saw, if Israel actually did make a canal in the south, wouldn't they have to compete with the Suez Canal, which already exists and is in the same area? Well, yes, they would. And it just doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint. And even if it did make sense from those standpoints, what does not make sense would be putting that canal directly through the most inhospitable, non-permissive environment that exists in the region, namely Gaza. That's my point. Okay, so I saw another question down here. Maybe a stupid question, but are there any other countries that get funds from, or is it just the U.S.? No, they get funds from other countries, or mostly in the form of military assistance. Even Germany was giving them some military assistance. Although a lot of that has dried up as this thing has worn on. What do you think of the content on Danny Haifong's YouTube channel? I haven't watched it, so I can't tell you. Let's see here. Somebody kill that fly. We're talking about bombing banks. Yeah, so if you didn't know, Israel has been performing a lot of airstrikes on Lebanon, not just southern Lebanon, but Lebanon in general. And a lot of them in the last few days have been directed at banks in southern Beirut, because these banks are engaged in money laundering for Hezbollah. You know, Hezbollah is a large, probably the world's largest transnational criminal organization. And they don't just get money from donations by U.S. tax dollars that are getting siphoned off to them, or Iran sending them billions of dollars a year, or money coming from Qatar, or places like that. They also have large business interests. There's a fascinating study that you can do on how they gain money from buying used cars in Latin America and shipping them to Africa, because you can get used rundown vehicles in Latin America fairly cheaply. They put them on ships, they ship them over to Africa, and there are places in Africa where those things sell for many multiples of what they cost in Latin America. And so the markup, the profit, then goes to Hezbollah. They've been involved in drug running. They've been involved in human trafficking. They've been involved in all sorts of criminal activity in Venezuela, especially because there's a large Lebanese population in Venezuela, and many of them are partial to Hezbollah. There's a huge Hezbollah presence in Venezuela. There have been a ton of Hezbollah operatives who have gone to Venezuela, had their passports reissued as Venezuelan passports. They've been sort of sheep-dipped as Venezuelans, and then they've gone through the Darien Gap and up into the United States. Without a doubt, there are thousands of Hezbollah operatives in the United States right now as we speak. Now, that's a good segue to talk about the book that I just released. If you haven't seen me talk about this already, I just released the full version of my book called Death of Civilization. And it's not just a treatise on how far America has fallen, but I make the point about how far America has fallen so that the second half of the book can tell you what you can do about it to try to keep your family safe in a new America. An America where we are likely to see localized or even generalized violence or unrest centered around the upcoming election in 2 weeks. And after that, especially if one of the candidates happens to win, who happened to already have been a president before and he likes golf, that guy, if he happens to win, you can bet your bottom dollar that the left is going to pull out all the stops and encourage lots and lots of unrest around the country. And so without a doubt, you need to be prepared for that. And I would suggest that you get a copy of my book and go through the checklists in the back of the book. You can skip the whole book. Just go to the checklists at the end and go through the checklists for your neighborhood, your house, your health, your kids, your church, and see where you're at and try to get prepared in the next 2 weeks. I put this out as a pre-release, as just a PDF file on my website, chuckholton.com, because I don't have time to get it out in print before the election. And I really feel like you need to have this information before the election. So I put it out as a PDF. You can get it by becoming a supporter at chuckholton.com over there on Locals. It's $7 a month. You can sign up there. You can do it for 1 month and then cancel it if you want to. I don't care. And like I said, look, if you can't afford it, you just send me an email and I'll send you a copy of it because I want you to have this information. I put this together over years. I've been compiling information from obscure military manuals and lots of other places. And this is more than just, you need to have 3 weeks of food, or you need to have extra water, and you need to have a bug out bag. It's more than just that. This is stuff that I all but guarantee you have not seen before, because this is based on how the U.S. military tried to keep its people safe in environments in Iraq and Afghanistan, places where there could be massive loss of civility and mob violence at any time. And so the way that they prepared their troops, I've adapted that for civilian use. And I think that you would very much benefit from getting this information. So go to chuckholton.com, become a supporter over there, and you can get not just that book, but you can also get my book called The Grace Project, which is about how to help your church craft a team of people who can help the church be a haven in times of crisis. Far too many churches just shut their doors when there's a hurricane, a fire, a flood, an earthquake, civil unrest, whatever. I almost said the bad word. Sicknesses. Excuse me. Far too many American churches just closed their doors and had nothing to offer. And you know what's sad about that? It's not because they couldn't have helped. It's because they weren't willing to help. And it's not because they didn't want to, but they weren't willing to because their insurance companies told them that it would be a bad idea. And they've become so risk averse that they can't do anything if the insurance company says it's a bad idea. And so things that traditionally were sort of part and parcel of the Christian faith, which is helping the widows and orphans, helping the poor and disenfranchised, helping in times of crisis, banding together and becoming a force for help and for good when everything is falling apart around them. Churches aren't willing to do that anymore because their insurance might get canceled. I don't want to talk about it because, about specifics, but I can tell you that I literally just went through this with a church that I'm very close to. And they literally told me that they are not willing to become an emergency shelter in times of crisis because it would make their insurance go up. And it just makes me sick to think about that. And so I put together this manuscript that's separate from the Death of Civilization book. This is a separate book. It's called The Grace Project, and you can get it on my website as well. And it will help you put together a crisis preparedness team at your church. You can get it as a perk of being a supporter over on my website, and I highly recommend that you do so. And again, if you can't afford $7 a month, I understand. Times are tough. Send me an email and I will send you a PDF copy because there are plenty of very generous people out there who are, and here comes my lovely wife with a t-shirt. Now, many of you have seen me wear this t-shirt before. This is a Black Rifle Coffee, turn it around, baby. This is a Black Rifle Coffee t-shirt. It was purchased right here in Savannah, Georgia today. It's got a Tacticock on the front. This is a rooster holding a suppressed M4 and wearing night vision goggles. Whenever I have worn that shirt, people go crazy. And they're in the comments, they are all saying, where do I get one of those? I got to have one of those shirts. These are great. Well, I'll tell you what, we are going to do a drawing 24 hours from now, tomorrow night, of our paying supporters over on chuckholton.com. You don't have to buy anything to be a part of this. This is not a raffle. We're not raffling it off, nothing like that. But just to say thank you to those of you who have supported us and given us the ability to help so many people around the world. We're making a video right now about just all the people that we have been able to help over the last year. We've literally paid for people who were blind to have surgery so that they can now see. We've helped women start micro businesses. We've paid for orphans and kids that their mothers are in prison. We've helped people in Israel. We've helped people in Burma. We've helped people in Colombia, here in the United States. We've sent thousands of dollars to help with orphanages and missions organizations and humanitarian organizations that are helping to clean up the mess from Hurricanes Milton and Helene. So all of that has been made possible by those people who are supporting us over at chuckholton.com. And so just to say thank you, we are going to randomly select one of you to receive this t-shirt from Black Rifle Coffee. And you can have your very own Tacticock. And so there you go. You can tell us your size later. And if you're a different size than that, that we have a large, she says. You get a large. So you may have to donate it to somebody if you're not a large. Anyway, we just got this idea. We want to say thank you. And we're also trying to support Black Rifle Coffee because they donate to help veterans. And it's a veteran-owned company. As a matter of fact, one of the founders of the company was in my company in the Ranger Regiment years ago. And so, yeah, locked, cocked, and loaded. Okay. So we are going to randomly give that away to one of our supporters. So if you're not a supporter, you might want to be. That's all I got to say about that. Okay. So, Black Rifle Coffee's best coffee on the planet, somebody says. All right, good. I'm glad you guys like Black Rifle Coffee. That makes me happy. Okay, please scroll up and see my question. Jessica Moore. Have you commented on the top Pentagon aide suspected of leaking critical and highly sensitive Israeli information? I'm not seeing anything on the news here in the U.S. It's pretty important. I talked about it at length last night, Lizzie. That leak was, in my opinion, very likely an intentional leak. This is pretty common from the Biden administration. We've seen a lot of leaks out of the Biden administration. And so, yeah, you can go back and watch the live from last night where I do talk about that if you want to see that. Now, let's see. You may have to add, okay, Jessica, I found your question. What are your thoughts about Springfield and the statement that Haitians are eating pets? Is this likely happening? Yes, it is likely happening. I don't know about pets, but at least geese and things like that. Look, I just came from Haiti. I was just there a couple days ago. And Haitians, you cannot expect people who grow up in a failed state, in a third world country, to migrate to the United States and 2 weeks later be well-adjusted American patriots. You just can't. And I don't know that I would even blame Haitians for that. You can't expect them to do that. And part of the problem with welcoming all of these masses, millions and millions and millions of illegal aliens into our country is that they bring the problems that they're fleeing with them. Because in some sense, they are the problems that they're fleeing. The lack of education, the lower IQ due to low nutrition, those sorts of things are hard to run from. And are there, wealthy or healthy or intelligent people from those countries coming to the United States? Absolutely. And that's even worse, because it represents a massive brain drain on those countries that desperately need their healthy, wealthy, and wise people to stay in their countries and help them get better. Right? So, question, what do you think of the two-state solution? Well, it doesn't really matter what I think of the two-state solution, speak the word only. It matters what the Palestinians and the Jews think of it, and both sides have already said that it's a non-starter, that they will not accept it. They don't want it. You won't find Palestinians who want a two-state solution by and large. And you certainly, after October 7th, before October 7th, you might have found a significant percentage of Israelis who would have been willing to entertain the idea, but no more. People who just watched 1,200 of their compatriots be, taken out by Hamas militants are not going to be very disposed to giving up half their country to the people who did the deed, right? So not likely. And so it doesn't really matter what the United States thinks about it, what Europe thinks about it. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks about it, except for the people who have to live with it. And those people don't want it. Both sides. Now, the difference is the Israelis will say, look, the Palestinians have to live somewhere. And as long as they can live peacefully, we don't, for the most part, have a problem with them staying where they are in Israel, in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, Hebron, and Gaza. We don't have a problem with them staying there. We're not saying they all have to die. We're not saying that they all have to leave. We're just saying they have to quit trying to kill us all the time. How hard is that? Good grief. And so the difference is, you talk to Israelis and they say, yeah, everybody needs a place to live and they can live there as long as they don't try to, run us over every chance they get. And you talk to the Palestinians and they say, no, the Israelis need to disappear. The Jews need to cease to exist, is what they'll say. That's a pretty big difference. And there's so much daylight between the two that anybody who thinks that the feckless foreign policy of the Biden or the Obama administrations was going to fix that problem is just demented. They're just demented. That's not going to happen. Okay? Okay, so Jimmy the Jew from Philly, you should read what he has to say. So, any other questions there? I don't think so. I'm just looking here. Are there Christians in Lebanon and Iran? Yes, there are many. Iran has one of the fastest growing populations of Christians of any country on the planet in terms of per capita growth. And that doesn't get reported on a lot, but Iran has a lot of people who are converting to Christianity. And Lebanon at one point was majority Christian, but it's not anymore. But there's still, I don't know, maybe 30, 40%. So yes, there are Christians in those. Now, Mystical Goat asks, do I think Israel will actually retaliate to Iran? Let me just say, Mystical Goat, if you're going to ask a question, please put it in all caps. It makes it a lot easier for me to catch it as it goes by. The answer to your question is yes. They are saying that Israel has now got all its ducks in a row in terms of their defensive capabilities, and the United States has come and brought their THAAD missile system to help shoot down any incoming missiles from Iran. And they've made their plans. They hit a little speed bump when some jackwagon in the Pentagon leaked some of those plans to Iran. But they're now saying that it's likely that that attack will come in the next couple of days. And I've been saying that for some time. So this is why I hate to make predictions, because all I'm telling you is what is being said right now. I don't know. What I will say is that, back on the discussion of whether or not Israel is winning or losing, if you wanted to make a case that Israel was losing, the fact that they have not yet retaliated against that attack, and it's been 22 days, shows that Israel is losing momentum without a doubt. Israel was on a roll there for a while. They were, they had Operation Grim Beeper. They were taking out Hassan Nasrallah. They were taking out the entire infrastructure or chain of command of Hezbollah. They got Yahya Sinwar. Boom, 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 boom. They're just rolling. The hits just kept coming. And then, they're not responding to this attack, this massive ballistic attack for 22 days. That doesn't look good. It's not a good look in the Middle East for Israel. Now, you might be able to understand why. They're trying to make plans. They're trying to get clearance from the United States, get buy-in from the United States. And so there are reasons why they haven't done it yet, but in the Middle East, the only thing that is respected is strength. And speed, surprise, and violence of action are the ways that you display strength in the Middle East. And so far, Israel they're doing okay on the surprise, but speed, not so much. And in the meantime, on Saturday, a Hezbollah drone, funded and provided probably by Iran, actually struck Netanyahu's home. At first, they said it struck near his home, but now they are saying that you can put out that it actually hit his home, which that's bad. Fortunately, nobody was injured. He wasn't there at the time. Nobody in his family was hurt. But the fact that they were able to get through Israel's air defenses and precisely target and strike the home of the prime minister That is super bad. And so it's only going to make it more necessary for Israel to actually respond in kind, kinetically. I mean, look, you can get all creative and, try to sell them a bunch of beepers or something, try to hack their financial system. Okay, no, but what really has to happen is things need to be going sky high in Tehran. A lot of things. Israel has the capability to do it. And I think the reason that they haven't done it so far is because the United States has been doing everything it can to block them, to keep them from doing it before the election, because they don't want anything to, get people to vote for Donald Trump. And Israel attacking Iran right now does put Israel's foot on the scale for Donald Trump. Now, Israel, we've all seen the many successful military operations that Israel has carried out during the last year. So that's a win. However, winning all the battles still leaves open the possibility of losing the war. And we know that because Afghanistan and Iraq, U.S. troops won every engagement that they ever engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan. And yet the politicians in Washington managed to pull off a loss after all that. And Israel could do the same thing if they're not careful. The fact that they are so non-transparent with the media makes that more likely. And that is a huge, huge red flag for Israel. It's a big mistake on Israel's part. Israel could very well achieve all their objectives and win the ground war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, everybody, and still lose the war because they've lost in the court of public opinion, because they have been so opaque by not allowing journalists like me in there to embed with their forces, to see what they're doing and to report on the good work that they're doing on the battlefield, because they just don't get it. They just do not get it. I can say with certainty, the IDF press office does not get it. They do not understand that they are the frontline troops in this war. That winning in the information battle space is more important than winning in the kinetic battle space. And because they don't get it, they are losing in the information battle space. That's the only place they're losing. But it's major, okay? So while they've had lots of successes, they've visited incredible costs. Well, I would say that their enemies had visited incredible costs on themselves by attacking Israel. They have managed, Israel, to safeguard its community by and large through their incredible technology in the Iron Dome system. And the economic costs on Israel have been much lower on a per capita basis than they have been on Iraq and Jordan and Yemen and Syria and Lebanon and Iran. So in all those ways, Israel is winning. And the only place they're losing is the information battle space. I'm trying to do what I can to change that. I'm trying to get the word out about what's happening in Israel. Unfortunately, Israel is not deigning to help me do that, help me help them very much. And I don't mean to seem bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm frustrated, sure, because I'm used to going into the front lines, donning my body armor, getting in there with the troops. I've been doing it for 2 decades. And somebody in the IDF press office is too risk averse to allow me in. Now, who is the real loser in this battle? Well, I think that in the long run, Israel will succeed beyond what their stated goals are. Their stated goals are, degrade their enemies and the proxies of Iran to the point that they can no longer be a threat, or at least as much of a threat to the Israeli people. They're going to do that. They have to do that. But in the process of doing that, I think there's a greater goal here that they are achieving right under our noses, and it's not getting as much press. Israel is changing the calculus of the Middle East. The moderate countries in the Middle East, like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan even, are starting to see that, number one, it's not a good idea to mess with Israel. Number two, Israel can be a much better friend than they can be an enemy. I mean, it would be much more advantageous for all those countries to make a friend of Israel than it would be to keep them as an enemy. So even if they disagree with the Jews, even if they don't like the Jews, even if they are angry about the Palestinian issue, many of the more pragmatic countries in the Middle East are starting to look at this calculus and say, you know what? It's obviously not very profitable for Iran to be so vehemently anti-Israel. And so we're going to moderate our stance. We're starting to see this. I mean, I'm not making this up. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia the other day was talking about his people and how they are, by and large, young, up-and-coming, population. And they could care less about the history between Israel and Palestinians. They could care less about that. All they want is, they want the new iPhone. They want economic security. And they realize that Israel can deliver a whole lot more economic security to the region than Iran can. And so they're starting to turn away from even more from Iran than they were already. And they already, as in Saudi Arabia especially, were enemies of Iran. So power politics in this region require a strong hand. Arabs, by and large, and Muslims also respect the strong horse in any conflict. And so Israel is now starting to be seen as the strong horse. They are absolutely decimating their enemies on multiple fronts. Yeah, it's taken a year. It'll probably take another year. These conflicts take time. And it's going to be costly. But in the end, I believe Israel is changing the calculus in the Middle East for generations to come. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that sometime in the future, 5 years from now, maybe 10, Israel and Iran will actually be allies. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's not so far-fetched as it might sound, because in the 1980s, Israel and Iran were allies, believe it or not, until the Shah was deposed. So it happened before. It could happen again. Okay, let's see if there's any more questions, and then we'll get at what, babe? Okay, want to announce this t-shirt. For those of you who are supporters on chuckholton.com, we are going to be sending one of you this t-shirt. It's a locked, cocked, and loaded t-shirt from Black Rifle Coffee. And we're going to be just sending it to you as a note of thanks for supporting the channel. So, listen, we are very grateful for all of you who donate. We try to be good stewards of that. We don't ask you to donate. I hope that you have noticed that. I don't come on the channel and ask you to give me money. My bills are paid. And I'm frankly astounded by the success of the channel over the last year. Very, very grateful. And I'm most excited about the fact that it gives me an opportunity to have a greater impact on the people that I report on. Because we go and report on people who are having their worst day. That's my job, is to go to places, the worst places around the world where people are having a really terrible time. And one of the most depressing things about my job always, ever since day one, was that I would go and I would see these people whose lives have just been decimated, and I couldn't fix it all. Its problem scale was just too big. But I could help one. And if God put one in my way and I found a way I could help them, I could help that one person. But through the magic of this modern technology, where it's not just one directional television, but you can actually interact with me through the video, that allows us to show you the people who are hurting, and then your generosity can multiply our effect. It becomes a force multiplier, and we can help a lot more people. And so I'm very grateful for those of you who choose to donate. I'm not asking you to donate, but I'm grateful for those who do. And so I want you to know that, and that's why we're giving away these t-shirts, okay? So what do you think of the 7 Israel spies for Iran that got arrested? So if you don't know that story, 7 Israelis were recently arrested in Israel for spying for Iran, if you can believe that. Traitors to their own country. Now, Iran has been trying to recruit spies inside Israel for a long time, and that has become really a full court press. They've been really pushing hard on that. And they've been doing it in some very disingenuous ways. It's not like they just put an ad in the paper and say, hey, you want to be a spy for us? What they do is they offer opportunities to people in Israel through social media like Facebook and other places, like, hey, get paid to do easy work online, whatever. And people that are gullible sign up for that. And the next thing you know, they're being asked to go drop off money someplace for something they're not told what it is. And they go drop off the money. After they do that, then they find out that they just dropped off money for another Iranian spy or something that could implicate them in an Iranian plot against Israel. And now they're kind of stuck because now Iran has the means to blackmail them into doing more and more and more for them. Hey, you better do this next thing, or, we could send all these photographs of you doing a drop for us to the Mossad or to the Shin Bet. And so these guys get themselves stuck at doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Israel has done a pretty good job of rooting out these spies and prosecuting them. So while to me it's sort of surprising that anybody who lives in a country that's under an existential threat from your neighbor would, in any way, shape, or form, agree to work with the neighbor that is threatening them. Because if you live in Israel, Israel could cease to exist if they lose this war. How could you do something to help Israel cease to exist, possibly? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. But people will do the stupidest things for money. And that's what I think that's all about. Okay, so that's my commentary on that. All right. So that's all I've got for today, folks. Thank you for watching The Hot Zone. I really appreciate all of you. I appreciate the growth that you've assisted. Please go hit that like button. I didn't say that yet, but there's 2,300 people watching. And if you go hit that like button, it tells YouTube that, hey, this is a content that people like. And it actually helps. And it doesn't cost you anything. And it helps us grow the channel. So that's one thing I will ask you to do is it's very simple. Just go take your little finger and click the like button. Click it. Click it now. It wants to be clicked. It's calling your name. My wife says I'm losing it. So, all right. Thank you, Daryl. I sure appreciate you. and all of you who have donated. So, all right. We don't know who won the shirt because we're going to wait 24 hours because the majority of people who will see this video are going to see it after it was live. And we want to give them a chance to go and become supporters at chuckholton.com if they so desire. And then we're going to download a list of the paying supporters at chuckholton.com, whether they're one-time, monthly, or annual. We're going to download that list, and we're going to tell ChatGPT to pick one of the names at random. They're going to give us the name. We're going to contact you and send you the t-shirt. That's the plan anyway. We'll see how well that works. This is the first time we tried something like that. I actually was frantically Googling it today to make sure I'm not breaking the law anywhere. We can't do a raffle. It's not a raffle. This is just a thank you gift for one of our lucky subscribers. So I want to give you the chance to become one of those if you so desire. All right? Okay, that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you, and we will see you next time.